Imagine this. The woman the world thought untouchable, walking through a room filled with the whispers of centuries of tradition, suddenly finds herself cornered, not by paparazzi, not by critics, but by the very institution she sought to influence. Could someone so powerful, so seemingly untouchable, really be exposed in front of the entire world? That's exactly what happened when Prince William revealed footage so shocking, so damning, that it left Meghan Markle with no way out. No allies. No escape. Only consequences. The question that haunted every corner of Buckingham Palace, every tabloid headline, and every social media feed across the globe was simple yet terrifying. How could one of the most scrutinized women on earth be hiding a conspiracy that even the monarchy couldn't ignore? And more importantly, what would it mean for her, for Prince Harry, and for the image of the royal family itself? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. In the first moments of this story, Meghan's life seemed perfectly orchestrated. Public appearances that drew admiration, interviews that won hearts, and a social media presence carefully curated to project confidence, empathy, and charm. But behind the flashes of cameras and the perfectly staged handshakes, a more complicated, shadowy reality was unfolding. Some insiders had whispered about odd meetings, private phone calls, and sudden changes in her schedule that didn't add up. Palace aides had noticed tension, subtle signs of secrecy that hinted at something much larger. But no one, not even William, could have anticipated the full scale of what they were about to uncover. Let's pause for a moment. Think about that for a second. In a world where every move is watched, where every word is recorded, where scandals make headlines in seconds, how could anyone pull off a secret long enough to build a conspiracy of this magnitude? Meghan Markle did not just step into the royal family. She allegedly stepped into a carefully calculated game of influence and manipulation. And the first clue that things weren't as they seemed came in the form of a hidden piece of evidence. A recording, small at first, easy to dismiss, but one that hinted at something far more insidious. The story begins quietly, almost imperceptibly. A palace aide notices a deleted file on a private server. A casual remark during a charity event triggers suspicion. Then, one afternoon, in a locked room at Kensington Palace, William sits down in front of a monitor, heart pounding, and begins to watch. At first, it seems mundane. Just conversations, just ordinary moments. But as the minutes tick by, patterns emerge. Subtle codes in her speech, hidden references to meetings with outside parties, whispers that seem harmless but, when pieced together, reveal a startling narrative. Meghan was allegedly orchestrating moves that could compromise the very institution that had welcomed her. Have you ever seen someone you thought you knew completely, only to realize you never really did? That's what William felt. A mixture of disbelief and resolve washed over him. He knew that revealing this evidence could fracture the monarchy, change public perception forever, and put a woman he once thought of as a family member in the most vulnerable position imaginable. Yet the choice was clear. Expose the truth or risk letting the conspiracy fester in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to explode. And explode it did. Within hours, the footage was being discussed quietly in palace corridors. A few aides whispered in the hallways. Security protocols were reviewed. Lawyers were consulted. Prince William, calm yet resolute, understood that the next steps would define not just Meghan Markle's fate, but the credibility of the monarchy itself. Meanwhile, Meghan, unaware that William had accessed the footage, continued her public engagements, smiling for cameras, exuding the confidence the world admired. But behind that smile, unbeknownst to the public, cracks had begun to appear. You might be wondering, how could she have hidden this for so long? How could someone so high-profile operate under such scrutiny? The answer lies in careful manipulation, a deep understanding of media narratives, and, according to insiders, a network of enablers who believed in her vision or feared challenging her. It was a web of secrecy that took years to weave. But even the most intricate webs have weak points, and this one was about to be unraveled in the most dramatic fashion imaginable. Now, think about the stakes. This was not just a scandal for social media gossip or tabloid sensationalism. This was a potential constitutional crisis. The monarchy relies on perception, tradition, and trust. Every secret uncovered, every misstep, chips away at that delicate balance. And when a royal figure is implicated in something beyond ordinary human error, when the very integrity of the institution is at risk, the repercussions are enormous. The arrest that would follow was not just legal. It was symbolic, historic, and deeply personal for everyone involved. As the world braced for what was to come, whispers of the footage began leaking. Sources close to the palace, anonymous yet credible, hinted at the shocking content. Strategic conversations, alleged plans to influence royal decisions, and evidence suggesting that Meghan's actions could no longer be framed as mere ambition or misunderstanding. The media buzzed, social media exploded, and the public, hungry for every detail, waited with bated breath. Every click, every headline, every rumor added pressure. And Meghan? She had no idea that the walls around her carefully crafted world were crumbling. This story is not just about one person being exposed. It's about a system being tested. It's about trust, loyalty, and the consequences of secrets in a world where nothing stays hidden for long. As you follow this narrative, consider this. What would you do if you discovered someone close to you was capable of manipulating truth itself? How would you react if the stakes were not just personal, but institutional, affecting the lives and legacies of countless others? And just when it seemed the tension could not rise any further, the unthinkable happened. Security cameras captured an interaction that, once revealed, would become the linchpin of the investigation. The footage, once private, now held the power to change everything. Meghan's fate was no longer just a matter of public opinion. It was about accountability, about consequences, about the very real possibility that she would face the law. And as William prepared to make his move, he understood something chilling. Once this secret was out, there would be no turning back. So why does this matter now? Because timing is everything. The monarchy had faced challenges before, but none like this. Global attention, relentless media scrutiny, and the ever-watchful eyes of a public invested in every royal twist meant that the exposure could not be contained. Every second that passed brought Meghan closer to confrontation, closer to arrest, closer to a moment that would redefine how the world saw her. The tension was palpable, and the stakes had never been higher. By now, you're probably asking yourself, what exactly did the footage reveal? How could it have been kept hidden for so long? And most importantly, what would Meghan do when the truth finally caught up with her? These are questions that everyone watching this story, inside the palace and around the world, wanted answered. And what William uncovered was just the beginning of a cascade of revelations, each more shocking than the last. But before we dive into the chapters that follow, imagine the scene for a moment. Meghan, once celebrated for her charm and poise, now facing scrutiny on a scale she could never have anticipated. Every move analyzed, every word dissected, every secret laid bare. Could she survive this? Could anyone survive such exposure? And more importantly, what secrets remained hidden that even William had yet to uncover? As this story unfolds, you will witness the unraveling of plans meticulously crafted, the fallout from alliances broken, and the emotional toll of betrayal at the highest level. You will see Meghan Markle, not as the public image projected in headlines and interviews, but as a complex figure navigating a crisis of unprecedented proportions. And as we move through each chapter, you will begin to understand the full magnitude of what was revealed, why it shook the monarchy, and why the world could not look away. The stage is set. The pieces are in motion. And as we step into the first chapter, you will discover the beginnings of a drama that no one, neither palace insiders nor the public, could have predicted. One thing is certain: Meghan Markle's life, the monarchy, and the world watching are all about to change forever. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The calm before the storm is often the most deceptive moment. It feels ordinary, almost serene, until the first ripple hits and you realize the peace was only an illusion. For Meghan Markle, that calm was a fragile illusion, meticulously constructed over months, perhaps even years. To the outside world, she seemed untouchable, smiling on red carpets, delivering speeches that drew applause, and navigating royal engagements with an ease that appeared effortless. But behind the poised exterior, a complicated, unseen narrative was quietly unfolding. The cracks were subtle at first, imperceptible unless you were paying attention, and Prince William was paying attention. Picture the scene: Kensington Palace, early morning. Sunlight spills through the grand windows, illuminating polished floors and gilded portraits. The palace is quiet, almost eerily so, except for the low hum of staff preparing for the day's engagements. Meghan moves through the hallways with her characteristic grace, her entourage flanking her like shadows. Smiles, handshakes, and carefully crafted small talk mask the undercurrents of tension. Staff whisper among themselves, noting little inconsistencies in schedules, phone calls that vanish, and private meetings with unfamiliar faces. They know something is off, but what exactly? Have you ever felt that sense of unease, when everything seems normal on the surface, but something in your gut tells you that trouble is brewing? That's precisely what the palace staff felt. Minor incidents, an aide being unexpectedly summoned, a schedule mysteriously changed, a delivery arriving without explanation, accumulated like drops of water in a storm cloud. Each incident seemed trivial in isolation, but together, they formed a pattern impossible to ignore. Meanwhile, Meghan maintained her public persona flawlessly. Cameras adored her. Social media followers showered praise. Charities welcomed her involvement. She was living a double life of sorts, one meticulously curated for public consumption and another shrouded in secrecy, maneuvering in ways only insiders could observe. There were rumors of her subtly influencing certain decisions within palace circles, of conversations held behind closed doors that were never meant for public ears. These whispers painted a picture of someone operating with intention, someone who understood the power of perception, and, crucially, someone who believed they could control it all. But even the most carefully orchestrated calm carries the seeds of its own destruction. For Meghan, the first signs of imminent disruption were subtle. A misstep in a casual conversation, an aide who remembered a detail differently, a confidential message accidentally left visible. These small cracks, unnoticed by the public, were magnified by William's sharp instincts. He had been watching, not out of suspicion alone, but out of responsibility to protect the monarchy and everyone within it. And his instincts were about to reveal that the calm was a facade, a thin veneer hiding something far more troubling. It began with an unassuming moment. William reviewing palace security footage from recent months, part of a routine audit. He wasn't expecting much, just routine logistics, standard protocol. But as he scanned the recordings, he noticed a subtle pattern. Certain meetings and communications didn't add up. There were brief encounters with individuals whose presence seemed unrelated to palace duties, and private phone calls that vanished as quickly as they appeared. It was like looking at a puzzle with pieces that didn't belong, and suddenly realizing that the image on the box had been intentionally misleading. Have you ever caught a small lie that later unraveled into a much bigger one? That's exactly the feeling William experienced. Each anomaly was a thread, and he could feel the web tightening. He began piecing together details from conversations, schedules, and unexpected guest appearances. A delivery logged at an unusual hour, a visitor who should have had no reason to be in the palace, a call made and quickly erased. These fragments coalesced into a troubling picture. It suggested planning, coordination, and foresight. Someone had been moving pieces carefully behind the scenes. Meanwhile, Meghan continued her engagements, unaware of the growing scrutiny. A royal luncheon here, a public appearance there, each carefully managed, each seemingly ordinary. Yet behind the polished smile and practiced wave, the machinery of palace investigation was quietly running. Aides, security, and William himself were connecting dots that pointed to the unimaginable, that Meghan might have been orchestrating a series of moves, conversations, alliances, and perhaps even deceptions that could compromise the royal family's reputation and influence. It was in these early moments that the tension began to build, not like a sudden explosion, but like a storm forming on the horizon. The calm, the tranquility, was being replaced with anticipation, unease, and a creeping sense that a major revelation was imminent. Each passing day increased the stakes. Every public appearance, every interview, every carefully staged photograph carried with it the weight of unseen scrutiny. William knew that patience was critical. Acting too soon could alert Meghan, giving her the chance to cover her tracks. Acting too late could allow the conspiracy to deepen, making the eventual fallout far worse. And yet, even as the pieces were being assembled, the palace remained outwardly calm. The public continued to see Meghan as the poised, unflappable figure she projected. Media outlets praised her engagements, charities celebrated her involvement, and social media buzzed with admiration. But beneath the surface, the tension was palpable. Staff whispered in corridors, aides exchanged glances during meetings, and security noted anomalies in seemingly mundane activities. Every detail, no matter how small, was being cataloged, analyzed, and stored. And all of it pointed to one inevitable truth. The calm was about to end, and when it did, nothing would ever be the same. By now, you're likely asking, what exactly was William seeing that triggered this heightened scrutiny? What was hidden behind the seemingly mundane events and public smiles? The answer lies in the subtlety of human behavior and the power of observation. William noticed patterns, repetitions, inconsistencies, and moments of human error that suggested deliberate action. It wasn't a single event, but a series of small, interconnected incidents that formed a larger narrative. And when pieced together, they revealed a level of coordination that could not be accidental. Think about that for a moment. In a palace watched by the public eye, under the constant gaze of journalists, historians, and royal watchers, someone had managed to operate with precision, moving behind the scenes, coordinating actions that were hidden in plain sight. That's the genius, and perhaps the danger, of Meghan Markle's approach. To the world, everything appeared perfect. To William and those closest to the monarchy, the pattern suggested something far more calculated. But even as the evidence accumulated, the storm had not yet broken. Meghan's public appearances continued, each one a carefully orchestrated display of confidence and composure. Every handshake, every wave, every carefully chosen outfit reinforced her image. Yet, with each passing day, the inevitability of confrontation grew. The calm before the storm was slipping away, and William knew that the moment of reckoning was approaching. A single misstep, a single reveal, could ignite a scandal unlike anything the monarchy had faced in decades. And then, the first undeniable sign came. A seemingly innocuous conversation, captured on security footage, revealed a detail that could not be ignored. It was small, almost insignificant, yet it tied together months of anomalies. For the first time, the calm gave way to clarity. William could see the outlines of a conspiracy, carefully concealed, yet now emerging in the most incriminating way. Every instinct screamed that action had to be taken. But what kind of action could confront someone so powerful, so skilled in managing perception, without risking an explosion that could engulf the entire royal family? Imagine watching someone you once trusted begin to unravel before your eyes. That is what William faced. The calm was gone. In its place stood a complex web of strategy, secrecy, and potential betrayal. The palace staff, once observers, were now participants in a delicate balancing act, ensuring that the evidence was preserved, the lines of communication were secure, and the eventual confrontation could be executed with precision. Every movement mattered. Every decision carried weight. And so, as the first chapter of this unfolding drama closes, the stage is set. Meghan Markle, celebrated for her poise and public charm, stands on the precipice of exposure. Prince William, the guardian of tradition and duty, has uncovered the threads of a conspiracy that threatens everything. The calm has vanished, replaced by a tension so thick it could be felt in every hallway, every room, every corner of the palace. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The moment Prince William discovered the hidden footage, the entire calm that had masked the palace's inner workings evaporated. What he saw was not just a simple recording. It was a doorway into a world no one outside those gilded walls could imagine. At first glance, the footage appeared almost mundane. Snippets of conversations, routine interactions, and seemingly ordinary events. But as he watched, second by second, the seemingly ordinary became extraordinary. The mundane transformed into incriminating, and the ordinary cadence of palace life was suddenly framed as a carefully orchestrated performance with hidden intent. Imagine sitting in a room, lights dimmed, the quiet hum of technology all around you, and watching someone you thought you knew completely reveal a side of themselves that shocks you to your core. That's exactly the sensation William experienced. It wasn't just disbelief. There was a rush of adrenaline, a tightening in the chest, and a sudden awareness that what he was witnessing could reshape not just Meghan's life, but the very narrative of the monarchy itself. The footage began innocuously. Meghan entering rooms, exchanging greetings, speaking in tones that seemed normal every day. But William's trained eyes, honed by years of observing nuance and detecting duplicity, noticed patterns almost imperceptible to anyone else. Certain gestures were repeated. Phrases that seemed casual were loaded with coded meaning. Subtle glances exchanged with aides hinted at prior instructions. Each frame was a piece of a puzzle, and the larger image emerging was far more concerning than he could have anticipated. Have you ever noticed something in a video or photo that others miss? Perhaps a small detail that hints at a bigger truth? That's what William saw. Little inconsistencies, moments that contradicted the public persona Meghan carefully maintained. A whispered instruction here. A concealed document there. A phone discreetly passed between individuals whose presence seemed out of place. None of it screamed criminality outright, but the implication of coordination was undeniable. William's mind raced. How long had this been going on? How many of these seemingly innocent interactions were part of a larger scheme? And most pressing, what exactly was she planning? These questions weren't just theoretical, they were real, urgent, and demanded immediate attention. But the challenge was as delicate as it was critical. Acting too soon could tip Meghan off, giving her time to cover tracks. Waiting too long could allow the conspiracy to escalate, perhaps beyond control. The palace aides who became aware of the footage described the moment with a mix of shock and awe. Some recalled a sense of surreal disbelief. "We knew she was ambitious," one aide whispered, but no one imagined it could be this coordinated. It wasn't just strategy, it was manipulation on a scale we hadn't seen before. Another aide, speaking on condition of anonymity, noted that the recordings contained references to meetings that were never publicly documented and conversations that suggested influence over decisions that traditionally belonged to senior members of the royal household. The more William watched, the more the magnitude of what he was seeing sank in. This wasn't a simple misstep or a moment of overreach. It was a deliberate, calculated effort, and the implications were staggering. In the wrong hands, these recordings could be explosive. In the right hands, they became undeniable proof of actions that could no longer be dismissed as rumor or speculation. Have you ever seen someone reveal their true self through subtle behavior, only to realize that all previous impressions were carefully constructed illusions? That's what this footage demonstrated. The camera captured Meghan not as the polished public figure, but as a strategist, someone who understood influence, perception, and the power of secrecy. And while the recordings themselves didn't scream criminal intent, they painted a picture that was troubling, compelling, and impossible to ignore. One clip, in particular, caught William off guard. It was brief, barely 30 seconds, but it revealed more than dozens of public appearances combined. Meghan was speaking with an aide in hushed tones, referencing an individual whose involvement was unknown to anyone outside the palace inner circle. The conversation included vague but pointed language about influencing decisions, timing public statements, and managing perceptions among key figures. William rewound and replayed the footage multiple times. Every nuance, every pause, every inflection became a clue in a puzzle that was quickly revealing a far more intricate plan than he could have imagined. And then there were the anomalies. Meetings that were scheduled but unrecorded in official logs. Conversations that seemed to vanish as quickly as they occurred, and movements across palace corridors that contradicted official itineraries. The footage was meticulous, yet it betrayed its own intent by capturing small, telltale signs of orchestration. William, with his unique perspective and deep understanding of palace protocol, recognized the signs immediately. Someone was coordinating actions with precision, using the cover of normalcy to conceal strategy, and operating under the assumption that no one would notice until it was too late. It's worth pausing here to consider the emotional weight of this discovery. Imagine uncovering evidence that challenges everything you believed about someone close to you. Shock, disbelief, a sense of betrayal. These are just the initial waves. They're followed by calculation, strategy, and the pressing need to act responsibly. William faced all of this at once. He understood the stakes. Not only Meghan's reputation, but the credibility of the monarchy, the trust of the public, and the stability of a centuries-old institution. And yet, there was also fear. Fear that revealing this footage could trigger a media frenzy unlike anything seen before, that public opinion could turn vicious, that allies could abandon their posts in confusion or self-preservation. Every decision carried immense risk. Every step required precision, discretion, and an awareness that the smallest miscalculation could have far-reaching consequences. But William was resolute. He knew that ignoring what he had discovered was not an option. The evidence demanded action, and action would require courage, patience, and strategy. Over the following days, he reviewed the footage repeatedly, cataloging each moment, annotating conversations, and piecing together a timeline. He consulted discreetly with trusted aides, legal advisors, and security personnel. Every possible angle was considered. Every potential fallout was analyzed. And as the picture became clearer, one truth emerged. Meghan Markle had woven a network of secrets, and it was now fully exposed to those who could hold her accountable. And just when it seemed that the implications could not grow any more severe, the footage revealed another layer. Something so unexpected that even seasoned palace officials gasped in disbelief. There were references to outside communications, interactions with parties whose involvement was previously unknown, and indications that certain actions had been deliberately staged for maximum public effect. It was one thing to suspect hidden agendas. It was another to see them unfold, meticulously recorded, undeniable, and unarguable. The realization hit William like a tidal wave. This was no longer a situation that could be managed quietly behind closed doors. The scope of what he had uncovered required decisive action. It required confronting reality, managing fallout, and preparing for a level of scrutiny that the monarchy had not faced in generations. The calm that had existed, the surface-level tranquility of palace life, was gone. In its place was tension, urgency, and the undeniable knowledge that the storm was imminent. And yet, even with all this evidence, the public remained blissfully unaware. Meghan continued her appearances, smiled for cameras, and projected a composed, unshakable image. Few could imagine the storm that was silently building behind the palace walls, nor the chain of events that the hidden footage would set into motion. William's discovery was only the beginning, and what it revealed would send shockwaves through every corner of the royal institution. The palace staff, too, felt the weight of the discovery. Whispers filled hallways. Eyes darted nervously during meetings. Security protocols were subtly heightened. The awareness of what had been uncovered spread like a quiet fire, contained, yet potent. Every person involved knew that they were now part of a pivotal moment in royal history, a moment in which secrets would no longer be hidden and truths would finally surface. And as the final seconds of the footage played, William understood the magnitude of what he held. This was not a minor scandal. It was a revelation with far-reaching consequences, capable of reshaping the public perception of Meghan Markle, challenging the stability of the monarchy, and exposing hidden agendas that had remained in the shadows for far too long. The calm was gone, replaced by a tense anticipation of the confrontation to come. But what came next would escalate the situation beyond anyone's expectations. And what William was about to do with this footage would leave the entire world stunned. The discovery of the hidden footage was only the first thread. What William uncovered next revealed a far more intricate design, a conspiracy that stretched across months, if not years, and involved layers of coordination that no outsider could have imagined. This was not simply ambition. It was strategy, secrecy, and influence woven into a narrative so carefully constructed that only someone with intimate knowledge of the palace's inner workings could detect it. And now, that narrative was coming into focus. It began with the subtle patterns William had already noticed. Repeated meetings with aides whose presence was never logged officially. Phone calls to outside contacts under cryptic aliases. Moments captured on surveillance that, when viewed alone, seemed trivial, but when pieced together, painted a picture of deliberate orchestration. Meghan Markle, the woman the world had celebrated for her charm and poise, was allegedly engaged in a web of activity designed to manipulate perception, influence decisions, and consolidate control in ways the monarchy had never experienced before. Have you ever watched someone's actions for long enough to notice the hidden threads connecting seemingly unrelated events? That is what William did. He began to map out the conspiracy, frame by frame, conversation by conversation. It was like watching a chess game played in slow motion, where every pawn, knight, and bishop had been placed with a long-term objective in mind. And in this game, the stakes were enormous. Public trust, the integrity of the monarchy, and the personal reputations of everyone involved. The palace staff, once mere observers, became pieces of this unfolding drama. Some aides and advisors had unknowingly facilitated parts of the plan. Minor adjustments in schedules, discreet handling of deliveries, silent cooperation in logistical decisions, all of which Meghan reportedly leveraged to her advantage. Others, perhaps more aware, remained cautious, silent, and strategic, understanding that the exposure of these activities could carry serious consequences. The layers of coordination were staggering, and William realized he was looking at a level of planning that was almost unprecedented. What made the conspiracy particularly remarkable was its subtlety. Meghan had not left behind glaring evidence of wrongdoing. There were no obvious crimes recorded. Instead, there were hints, carefully chosen words, seemingly casual suggestions, meetings timed with precision, and an understanding of the public narrative that suggested manipulation behind the scenes. Each piece of footage, each observation, was a small revelation, harmless alone, but damning when assembled together. Consider this for a moment. Someone so scrutinized by the world, under constant media attention, in a family obsessed with protocol and procedure, had managed to operate in ways that evaded detection. It required an understanding of human behavior, an intuition for timing, and a strategic mind capable of balancing public performance with private maneuvering. William realized the depth of the situation almost immediately. This was not a mistake or misjudgment. This was intentional. And yet, even with all the evidence, the situation remained delicate. Acting prematurely could alert Meghan, allowing her to cover tracks, rewrite narratives, and potentially neutralize the impact of the revelation. Acting too late could let the conspiracy continue, perhaps growing bolder and more influential. It was a tense balancing act, a high-stakes game where every decision carried enormous consequences. The footage included conversations that, on the surface, appeared innocuous. Meghan discussing schedules, charity events, and engagement plans. But underneath those words lay coded intentions, references to alliances, suggested messaging strategies, and instructions to aides that indicated influence over decisions typically reserved for senior members of the royal household. William replayed these moments repeatedly, analyzing every inflection, every gesture, every hesitation. With each viewing, the pattern became clearer. This was a calculated effort to shape outcomes, both public and private, to align with Meghan's objectives. The emotional weight of this realization cannot be overstated. William was faced with a dual challenge: the personal betrayal of someone he once considered family, and the professional responsibility to safeguard the institution. There was shock, certainly, but also resolve. He knew the exposure of this conspiracy was inevitable, and that how he managed it would define not only Meghan's fate, but the perception of the monarchy for years to come. What makes conspiracies so compelling is their layering. Meghan had allegedly orchestrated multiple threads at once, influencing public perception, coordinating with aides, and timing appearances and announcements to maximize impact. It was the subtlety of these moves that made the conspiracy so dangerous. Each action was calculated to appear routine, but when analyzed collectively, the strategy was undeniable. William and his closest advisors began assembling a timeline, mapping interactions, and documenting behavior. The emerging narrative was both shocking and meticulous, revealing a level of foresight and planning few could have anticipated. The palace environment, usually predictable and governed by centuries of tradition, suddenly felt unstable. Every hallway, every room, every interaction became a potential clue, a piece of the puzzle that could confirm or deny the unfolding conspiracy. Staff members, once mere observers, now played roles in a larger drama. Some were aware of the emerging pattern, others remained oblivious, continuing their duties as if nothing were amiss. And above it all, Meghan continued her public life, unaware that the very institution she sought to influence was quietly piecing together the evidence that could confront her with the full scope of her actions. The unfolding conspiracy also revealed a contradiction between Meghan's public persona and private maneuvers. Outwardly, She projected empathy, elegance, and benevolence. Charitable events, public appearances, and media interviews showcased a persona designed to attract admiration and trust. But the footage suggested a calculated side, one that understood leverage, influence, and timing to manipulate outcomes behind the scenes. William could not ignore the dissonance. Public perception had been carefully managed, but now the private reality was surfacing. Have you ever realized that someone you admired or trusted might be operating under an entirely different set of motives than what they show the world? That tension between expectation and revelation is what William faced. The conspiracy was not abstract. It was concrete, observable, and documented. Each piece of evidence reinforced the understanding that the calm, public-facing Meghan was only one layer of a much more complex reality. And yet, even in the midst of this revelation, uncertainty remained. While the patterns were clear, the intent was harder to discern. Was this a calculated manipulation for personal gain? An effort to influence decisions within the royal family? Or something even more strategic, designed to secure an advantage in ways that William could not yet fully understand? The footage suggested coordination, but human motives are rarely simple. The palace now had to navigate not only the evidence, but also the question of intent, perception, and consequence. Then came the emotional impact. Seeing a family member potentially orchestrating events behind closed doors is jarring, even for someone as composed as William. There was betrayal, certainly, but also concern for what this exposure might mean for the broader royal family. Staff, aides, and security personnel were suddenly aware of their roles in a drama that extended far beyond ordinary protocol. The footage was no longer a passive record. It was a catalyst, a spark that could ignite public scrutiny, media frenzy, and unprecedented internal tension. And as the conspiracy unfolded on screen, one realization became undeniable. Meghan Markle's actions could not remain hidden. Every subtle gesture, every carefully placed conversation, every strategic interaction revealed a network of influence that could no longer be dismissed. The calm that had masked these actions was gone, replaced by the urgency of accountability and the inevitable confrontation that was coming. But just when it seemed that William had grasped the full scope of the situation, the footage revealed yet another layer, one that no one anticipated. Conversations with outside contacts, references to individuals whose involvement had never been documented, and strategic coordination across multiple channels suggested a reach that extended beyond the palace walls. It was a revelation that would change the stakes entirely, escalating the situation to a level that would shock the public once exposed. The calm before the storm had vanished completely. What William was now facing was a conspiracy of unprecedented complexity, carefully orchestrated and meticulously hidden in plain sight. And as the realization settled in, he knew the next steps had to be calculated, precise, and decisive. The evidence demanded action, but the approach had to account for both the personal and institutional consequences. And just when the tension could not rise any higher, William understood one chilling truth. This conspiracy was only the beginning, and what came next would expose secrets no one had imagined. The storm was approaching, and Meghan Markle's carefully constructed world was about to collide with the reality of exposure in ways that would leave everyone, staff, family, and public alike, reeling. But what came next would unravel the carefully crafted layers of secrecy entirely, and no one, not even Meghan, could have predicted the consequences that lie in every conspiracy. There are those who support and those who oppose, whether openly or in secret. For Meghan Markle, the unfolding drama was as much about the people around her as it was about her own actions. Allies who once seemed loyal now faced difficult choices. Enemies, some of them hidden in plain sight, prepared to capitalize on every misstep. The palace, with its centuries of tradition and hierarchy, had a network of influence and power that could make or break anyone. And in the middle of it all, Meghan was navigating relationships that would define not only her future, but also the stability of the monarchy itself. Consider this. In a world where appearances matter more than reality, loyalty is a fragile commodity. Allies may support you when convenient, but the moment risk appears, some disappear silently. Meghan had cultivated relationships inside and outside the palace, advisors, aides, staff, and external media contacts. Each relationship, each handshake, each seemingly casual conversation served a purpose. But William's discovery of the hidden footage shifted the balance. Allies had to choose: remain in her corner, risk exposure, or align themselves with the institution she now appeared to be undermining. From the start, Meghan's most visible allies were those who benefited from her influence. Some staff members, enchanted by her charm or inspired by her vision, facilitated her movements, managed communications, or quietly endorsed her initiatives. They were the subtle enablers, the ones who handled the details no one else noticed. But when William's investigation began uncovering inconsistencies, these same allies suddenly found themselves in precarious positions. Could they continue supporting her without incriminating themselves? Could they maintain their loyalty without risking their careers, reputation, or even freedom? And then there were the enemies, some overt, some covert. Within the palace, certain figures had long been wary of Meghan's presence and influence. They had observed, for months, the patterns, the meetings, and the unusual interactions that hinted at manipulation. Some of them had suspected a degree of strategic orchestration, but had lacked the evidence to act. Now, with William uncovering hidden footage, these enemies suddenly held the moral and practical high ground. Their opportunity to act, to counteract Meghan's influence, and to protect the integrity of the institution had arrived. Have you ever noticed how tension rises most dramatically not from action itself, but from the anticipation of it? That is exactly what the palace was experiencing. Allies hesitated, enemies watched, and Meghan remained blissfully unaware of the storm she was walking into. Every decision, every move, every word exchanged had the potential to tip the scales. Trust became a dangerous gamble, and missteps could have consequences far beyond what anyone anticipated. The complexity of Meghan's alliances became even more apparent when the footage was cross-referenced with palace records and personal accounts. Certain aides were seen coordinating subtly, arranging meetings and delivering messages in ways that seemed routine but now appeared deliberate. Every nod, every pause, every glance carried significance. Some staff members, loyal to Meghan, had been unwitting participants in a system designed to influence decisions. Others, who harbored skepticism, began quietly documenting anomalies, building their own understanding of the unfolding web. William's awareness of this dynamic was acute. He understood that confronting Meghan directly was only part of the challenge. He also had to navigate the network of people surrounding her. Allies might panic, shift loyalties, or misstep in their handling of sensitive information. Enemies might act preemptively, attempting to leverage the unfolding situation for their own advantage. Every conversation, every observation, every recorded interaction became a strategic consideration in a game where one miscalculation could be catastrophic. One striking revelation from the footage was how Meghan's influence extended beyond personal interactions. Subtle gestures, suggestions made in hushed tones, and seemingly casual advice were used to manipulate schedules, public statements, and even charity decisions. Allies who once acted in good faith had become instruments in a strategy they might not have fully understood. The web of influence was meticulous, carefully layered, and now fully visible to William and his trusted advisors. The tension was further heightened by the unpredictability of human behavior. Allies who had once appeared steadfast now wavered. Some questioned whether the loyalty they felt was worth the risk of exposure. Others feared retribution if the conspiracy was revealed. Meanwhile, enemies seized opportunities to gather evidence, document inconsistencies, and prepare for confrontation. The palace had become a chessboard, each move calculated, each player aware of both immediate consequences and long-term implications. Consider the irony. Meghan, whose public image was carefully curated, appeared in footage that contradicted the narrative she had presented to the world. Allies were implicated not through malice, but through proximity, becoming part of a system that now seemed designed to unravel under scrutiny. Enemies, previously sidelined, now saw the opportunity to assert influence, protect the institution, and expose the hidden strategy. The balance of power had shifted, and no one inside the palace, or outside, was entirely sure what would happen next. The emotional stakes were immense. Allies faced internal conflict, loyalty versus self-preservation, admiration versus fear, Complicity versus accountability. Enemies face strategic decisions. Act too early and risk destabilizing the palace. Act too late and risk allowing Meghan to consolidate further influence. And Meghan, at the center of it all, remained unaware that the calm she had cultivated was dissolving, that the relationships she relied upon were fraying, and that the consequences of her actions were rapidly converging. William, observing the unfolding dynamics, had to consider both the human and institutional implications. He understood that the revelation of Meghan's actions would not only impact her reputation, but also the credibility of the monarchy, the perception of the royal family, and the stability of an institution built on centuries of tradition. Allies and enemies alike were part of this calculus, each reaction potentially magnifying the consequences. And then came the moment that crystallized the complexity of Meghan's network. A series of interactions captured on footage revealed how allies had unknowingly facilitated key elements of her strategy. Instructions passed in whispers, subtle guidance during events, and the careful orchestration of appearances all pointed to deliberate coordination. At the same time, the footage suggested that some allies were already questioning their role, raising the possibility of leaks, internal dissent, and exposure. It was a delicate, tense balance. A house of cards waiting for the slightest disturbance to collapse. Have you ever witnessed a situation where loyalty, fear, and strategy collide in a way that is almost unbearable to watch? That was the atmosphere within the palace. The convergence of allies and enemies, coupled with the revelations from hidden footage, created a pressure cooker environment. Every interaction carried weight. Every decision was potentially pivotal. And at the center of it all stood Meghan Markle, poised and composed in public, yet oblivious to the forces moving quietly around her. The tension continued to escalate as William and his trusted advisors mapped the network of relationships. Allies were categorized, their potential reactions assessed, and the level of risk associated with each individual meticulously evaluated. Enemies were observed, their likely strategies anticipated, and contingencies developed to counter any unexpected actions. The palace had become a strategic arena, where every whisper, glance, and gesture mattered, and where the unfolding conspiracy required constant vigilance. And as the network of allies and enemies came into sharper focus, one thing became clear. Meghan's carefully orchestrated world was more fragile than she, or anyone else, realized. The relationships she had relied upon to maintain influence were now potential vulnerabilities. Allies could falter under pressure. Enemies could exploit any misstep. The calm before the storm had long since passed, replaced by a tense anticipation of the confrontation that was inevitable. But just when it seemed the palace had fully assessed the network, one unexpected revelation surfaced. An ally whose loyalty had appeared unshakable now seemed to be questioning their role. This person, previously thought to be a cornerstone of Meghan's influence, could either become a crucial supporter or a catalyst for exposure. The balance of power teetered precariously, and the next move, whether from ally or enemy, had the potential to tip the scales entirely. The web of influence, deception, and loyalty was now fully revealed, and Meghan Markle was surrounded, not only by those who supported her, but also by those ready to act against her. The calm was gone. The stage was set, and the unfolding drama promised that the storm was about to break in ways that would shock the monarchy, the public, and Meghan herself. But what came next would push the boundaries of betrayal and strategy further than anyone could imagine, and no one, not even Meghan, would be prepared for the consequences. The first signs of trouble rarely announce themselves with fanfare. They appear quietly, in small, almost imperceptible moments that seem trivial at first, but over time, reveal the cracks in even the most carefully constructed facade. For Meghan Markle, these cracks were subtle but insidious, quietly emerging in ways that would, in hindsight, make it impossible to ignore. The calm of her carefully curated public life was beginning to fracture, and the tension inside the palace was escalating by the hour. It started with minor anomalies that could easily be dismissed. A schedule that changed at the last minute. A delivery left in the wrong place. A staff member quietly questioned about an unusual interaction. On the surface, these incidents were mundane, the kind of details palace staff are trained to manage without notice. But when pieced together, patterns began to emerge. anomalies that hinted at something far more deliberate. And when Prince William reviewed these events alongside the hidden footage, a chilling picture began to form. Meghan's influence was not only calculated, but potentially destabilizing. Imagine being in a place where every word, every movement, and every decision could have ripple effects across centuries of tradition. Now imagine realizing that someone close to you, someone you thought you knew, might be quietly manipulating these ripples for their own purposes. That was the environment inside the palace as the first real signs of trouble became impossible to ignore. Staff whispered nervously in hallways. Aides exchanged glances that carried more meaning than words, and the palace security teams became hypervigilant, suddenly aware that something extraordinary was unfolding. Have you ever noticed how tension grows most intensely when small, seemingly disconnected events start to align? That is exactly what was happening. Meghan's minor inconsistencies, the way she spoke, the people she met in secret, the odd timing of appearances, began to create a web of suspicion. William, now acutely aware of the implications from the footage, watched closely as patterns became clear. Every detail mattered. Every interaction carried weight. And every day brought new evidence that the calm was nothing more than an illusion. The first tangible sign of trouble came during a routine engagement. Meghan was scheduled to attend a charity luncheon, a carefully orchestrated public display that showcased her compassion and poise. On the surface, it was flawless: smiles for cameras, a well-prepared speech, and interactions that seemed perfectly natural. But behind the scenes, staff noticed discrepancies. Invitations had been adjusted at the last minute. A key aide seemed unusually anxious, and security cameras captured movements that were never logged. It was subtle, almost imperceptible to anyone not paying attention, but for William and his inner circle, it was the first clear indication that something was amiss. The significance of these seemingly minor disturbances cannot be overstated. They were the first real evidence that Meghan's carefully managed public persona might be masking more complex and potentially dangerous activities. A palace aide later described the feeling as a slow dawning realization, an awareness that the events unfolding were not random but intentional. Every detail, no matter how small, seemed designed to influence outcomes, manipulate perception, or create opportunities that could undermine the monarchy's authority. And then came the whispers. Rumors that had circulated quietly among palace staff began to gain traction, each one more alarming than the last. Conversations in private offices, fleeting interactions during meals, and subtle hints dropped in casual remarks painted a troubling picture. Meghan was not merely ambitious. She was strategic, calculated, and aware of the levers of influence at her disposal. Her actions, once dismissed as routine, now seemed part of a deliberate plan to shape events in ways that benefited her. Have you ever felt a sense of dread build gradually, the way a storm slowly gathers on the horizon before unleashing its full force? That is exactly how the palace staff experienced the first signs of trouble. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't dramatic. But it was unavoidable. Every day, every interaction, every observation contributed to a growing awareness that the equilibrium of the palace was being threatened. The tension intensified when Meghan's private communications came under scrutiny. Emails, messages, and recorded conversations revealed instructions and suggestions that appeared innocuous in isolation, but, when combined, formed a clear strategy. Staff and aides were given subtle directions that influenced scheduling, messaging, and even public appearances. What seemed like minor guidance now appeared as deliberate orchestration, a network of influence carefully designed to manage perception both within the palace and in the public eye. William, ever meticulous and strategic, began to piece together a timeline of events. Each anomaly was cataloged. Every unusual meeting, every unexplained phone call, and every secretive interaction was mapped to uncover patterns. The emerging picture was startling. The first signs of trouble were not mere coincidences. They were deliberate actions that, when combined with the hidden footage, revealed a conspiracy in motion. And then the first public signs appeared. Social media, always quick to detect controversy, began noticing inconsistencies in Meghan's appearances and statements. Paparazzi photos captured moments that contradicted official narratives. Journalists, sensing an undercurrent of tension, began asking questions that subtly hinted at discord within the royal household. While the public remained largely unaware of the full extent, the pieces were beginning to converge, signaling that the calm was about to shatter entirely. The palace environment, usually governed by protocol and routine, became a pressure cooker. Staff whispered in hallways. Security protocols were discreetly heightened. Advisors debated the implications of every interaction. And above it all, Meghan continued to operate under the assumption that her carefully managed image remained intact. The tension was almost tangible, the sense of impending confrontation unavoidable. One particularly telling moment occurred during a private briefing. William, presenting his findings to a small group of senior aides, highlighted the anomalies that had been observed in conjunction with the hidden footage. The reactions were a mix of disbelief, shock, and concern. Some aides had suspected minor irregularities but had never imagined the extent of the orchestration. Others realized that their roles, whether knowingly or unknowingly, had contributed to the strategy that was now being revealed. The first signs of trouble had become undeniable, and the palace was now fully alert. And yet, even as the first signs became clear, uncertainty remained. Meghan's intentions were still partially obscured. Were these actions motivated purely by ambition, or was there a deeper strategy at play? Were her allies complicit, or simply caught in a complex web of coordination? Every answer seemed to lead to more questions, heightening the tension and creating a sense of inevitability. The moment of confrontation was coming, and nothing could stop it. Have you ever realized that a problem you initially thought small could escalate far beyond expectations? That is exactly what was happening. The first signs of trouble, once minor and easily dismissed, were now converging into a crisis that demanded immediate attention. William understood that careful management was essential. Acting too soon risked alerting Meghan and potentially destabilizing the palace. Acting too late risked allowing the conspiracy to deepen, with consequences that could extend far beyond personal reputations. And as the day drew to a close, the tension inside the palace reached a crescendo. Security teams were alert, staff members were tense, and aides exchanged urgent glances. Every detail mattered, every movement was monitored, and every decision carried weight. The calm that had defined Meghan's public persona was gone, replaced by the unmistakable signs of trouble. But just when it seemed the situation could not become more precarious, one unexpected revelation surfaced. A seemingly minor interaction, captured on footage and overlooked in previous reviews, that hinted at the next escalation. The first signs of trouble were only the beginning, and what came next would ignite a chain reaction that no one inside or outside the palace could have predicted. The storm was approaching. The calm was shattered, and Meghan Markle, unaware of the growing scrutiny and the forces gathering against her, was about to confront a reality that would change everything. But what came next would escalate the situation far beyond anyone's expectations, and no one, not even Meghan herself, would be prepared for the consequences. The discovery of Meghan Markle's hidden activities was only the beginning. The real challenge for Prince William was figuring out how deep the web went, who was involved, and what the true implications were. It wasn't enough to notice anomalies, spot inconsistencies, or witness suspicious interactions. To fully understand the scope of the situation, William had to conduct an investigation, careful, methodical, and discreet. And in a palace where every action is scrutinized and every word carries weight, conducting such an investigation was a delicate, high-stakes operation. From the start, William understood the stakes. This was no ordinary scandal. It wasn't simply about public image or personal betrayal. It was about the integrity of the monarchy, the perception of the royal family, and the potential for long-term consequences that could shake the very foundation of tradition. Every piece of evidence, every conversation, every subtle observation had to be handled with precision. A misstep could lead to leaks, public outrage, or a deeper crisis that would be impossible to contain. William began by reviewing the hidden footage in painstaking detail. Every gesture, every word, every glance was analyzed. It wasn't just about what Meghan said. It was about what she didn't say, what she implied, and how those implications could have affected decisions within the palace. Patterns emerged, revealing coordination, timing, and influence that extended far beyond what anyone had suspected. It was strategic, calculated, and most importantly, documented in a way that could not be denied. Have you ever had to piece together a puzzle where the pieces are scattered and some may be intentionally misleading? That was the challenge William faced. Every interaction he observed, every schedule anomaly, and every secretive conversation had to be cross-referenced with existing records. Meetings were mapped, communications logged, and timelines reconstructed. The palace staff, once passive observers, became critical participants, providing insights, corroborating details, and helping to build a comprehensive understanding of the emerging picture.